Dreamcast may not have had a ton of RPGs on it, but it certainly had some of the best of the generation, especially for a machine so green out of the gate. It jumped into the 128-bit generation while so many were still enjoying the 32-bit one, and gave us some absolute standouts. Let's take a look at some of the most well-known RPGs on the Dreamcast. We'll be going in the order of games I enjoyed the least for whatever reason to the ones that I enjoyed the most. And let me go ahead and tell you, there are no stinkers on this list. Let's get started. Phantasy Star Online, version 2. When Phantasy Star Online hit the Sega Dreamcast in 2000 in Japan and 2001 worldwide, it wasn't what people were expecting as a new entry into the long-running RPG franchise. This was a beloved turn-based RPG franchise, and yet a bold move changed it into a console game that brought real-time, cooperative, online role-playing to living rooms everywhere. Before World of Warcraft, before Final Fantasy XIV, there was Phantasy Star Online. It took great strides to be different, to build something new, and to give gamers an impressively elegant experience that changed what online gaming could look like on a home console. Looking at it from this perspective, years later and solo, not online, I can still see the magic that was there and consider what it would have felt like back then to be able to explore this world and sink so many hours into it. Now, to get into the actual game. The game takes place on Ragall. You begin with the Pioneer II colony ship arriving to find the original Pioneer 1 expedition mysteriously wiped out following a massive explosion. Bummer. As a hunter sent to the surface, your job is to uncover the truth, destroy hostile life forms, and eventually piece together a mystery that goes deeper than it might seem. The narrative is largely delivered through logs and bits of exposition between missions. This setup lends itself well to an MMO world. It's minimalistic but atmospheric, and with just enough intrigue to keep you moving forward. You may be doing simple quests like fetching so many of something or finding a lost person, but the combat in between and the gameplay loop is what will keep you coming back. The story is sort of just the cherry on top, an unnecessary cherry for the most part, but still a cherry on top. If you're into that MMO grind, this is all you need. But it's still neat to see the glue that binds the purpose of kill, level, gear, repeat. Gameplay is surprisingly action-oriented. It's weird for me to think about how the Dreamcast had only the telephone line port as a base on the console, yet you could find yourself playing with people everywhere and sending enough and receiving enough information that the beeps and boops of the internet at the time could register timing like this. You create your own character from a few races and classes, from androids to humans, hunters to forces, or, I guess that's what they call magic users. Combat takes place in real time with combos like shoot, shoot, big shoot, or small hit, big hit. And spellcasting is all done through the simple 3-button system. It's slower and more methodical than later action RPGs, but it has weight. Each swing, each shot, or each technique feels deliberate, with timing and positioning playing key roles. If you mess your setup for 3 hits, it's like messing up a rotation in World of Warcraft as an example. It feels bad and it can be dangerous. Regarding character creation, most of the models look pretty cool. I liked in particular this robot woman, and when I discovered I can make her tall and thick like a $10 milkshake, I decided to name her Snoo Snoo.
Death! By Snoo Snoo!
Yeah! Snoo Snoo's mag thirst for man flesh. Anyway, gameplay is basically a series of pick up a quest, go do that quest, kill monsters and grind in that area, head back, get monies, get upgrades, and then on to the next quest. You can visit locations without quests, but you might as well get more bang for your buck by doing the quest. The gameplay is simple enough, but also addictive enough. If you're familiar with MMOs, you're going to get it. You'll get it. If you're not, this is what it's about, really. Apparently, what truly made Phantasy Star Online revolutionary, though, was the online component. Obviously. And while you can still play this online with folks, it takes some setting up, and I didn't do it. I decided to approach this as a single-player expectation, since it can be played offline. This is my understanding of the online setup. Up to 4 players could team up over that hamster of a wheel internet connection and tackle dungeons together, chat in lobbies, share loot, and build a sense of camaraderie and community that is typical in MMOs now. But that was shockingly modern at the time. There were no microtransactions, no monthly fees in the West. You just plug up your Dreamcast modem, connect, and go. The drop-in and drop-out co-op was seamless for the time, at least from what I hear. And players quickly developed social hubs like guilds, or whatever you want to call them, trading circles, and friend groups. Apparently, the game even included a very basic auto-translate feature for international players, which is really kind of insane to think about. This, of course, given the popularity of it among different countries, but the small player base, was a small step toward global multiplayer in the right direction. While the Dreamcast's limited memory and bandwidth kept voice chat off the table, unfortunately, the icon-based and keyword chat systems, even some typing on the keyboard, got the job done. Offline play was also fully supported, which is what I was experiencing myself. This allowed solo players to experience the same content, albeit with less loot and social interaction. I say same, but apparently you could download missions. Like I tried the option to download a mission, and obviously it wasn't going to work because I wasn't connected, so I couldn't access that. The grind is the appealing part here for me. It feels rewarding thanks to a deep loot system, randomized drops, and collectible mags, floating companions you raise and customize over time. I care very little about this sort of stuff, about the mags really, but I imagine that they felt pretty neat, and they get pretty neat eventually. Each run through the forest, caves, mines, and ruins felt just different enough to stay engaging. You fight the same monsters in there, but every time you get to see a new monster type, hey, it's thrilling. I just kept running into the forest, doing quests, shooting things, and carrying on. Shooting things feels good. Hitting things feels good. Getting new loot feels good. Exploring new areas feels good. Maybe offline, but if you're just looking to grind some levels and see what it was like, you might consider it. Visually, Phantasy Star Online was striking for the era. Heck, I think it was even impressive. It brought the world of Phantasy Star into 3D futuristic environments bathed in glowing light, colorful spell effects, and stylish character designs, and made it stand out. The clean UI and slick animations gave it a polished feel far beyond what most console games were even doing at the time, while they were offline. And the soundtrack? Haunting, synth heavy, and beautiful. Very synth heavy, I love it. It's actually one of the most distinctive soundtracks in the series, and I guess it has to do with that really heavy synth. I don't know that I particularly like it over the other entries in the series, because I happen to really respect the music in those, but it was enjoyable enough that I didn't feel the need to turn on music to rock out to while I shoot things over and over. I just enjoyed the in-game stuff. Phantasy Star Online was way ahead of its time. It's neat to go back and imagine what it must have been like at the peak of its popularity. I wish I had been there to experience it. This game didn't just experiment, hey, it delivered. Even now, over 2 decades later, its influence echoes through every online co-op RPG that followed. For Dreamcast owners, it wasn't just a game, it was a portal to something bigger, and it likely sated a lot of RPG lovers then, and started a lot of addictions that likely have carried into today's MMOs. Record of the Lodos War. Released in 2001 in the US for the Dreamcast, Record of the Lodos War is the definition of cult classic action RPG. The game draws inspiration from both Western dungeon crawlers like Diablo and its high fantasy anime roots of the same name, Record of the Lodos War. Developed by Neverland, the studio behind Lufia, which is really impressive, the game proves to be more than a spin-off of the Lodos anime and novel series. It's a gritty, loot-heavy, methodical adventure that wears its Diablo-like DNA on its sleeve. You know those Monopoly-themed games like My Little Pony Monopoly or Scooby-Doo Monopoly? This is like Record of the Lodos War Monopoly, but it's actually Diablo. Now, is that a bad thing? No, especially if you're a fan of the anime and a fan of Diablo. And it's certainly no worse than, I don't know, Scooby-Doo Monopoly was for fans of Scooby-Doo and Monopoly. Maybe I should just shut up. Yeah, let's just move on. Monopoly, sorry, no, not that anymore. In Record of the Lodos War, you play as an unnamed hero resurrected by a dark wizard named Wart. You were apparently a pretty big deal before you died in battle. This wizard has brought you back to life to stop a powerful evil threatening the war-torn island of Lodos. The narrative is okay. It doesn't need a lot of motivation, but I do feel like there is enough story to keep players interested in what's going on. The game is certainly atmospheric, much like Diablo, as the world feels real, connected, and on the verge of trouble. The story is delivered through stone tablets, sparse dialogue, and a few cutscenes, and some absolutely bleak visuals. There's an impressive tone to the world, a land decimated by ancient wars and corrupted by magic. And while it doesn't lean heavily into plot twists or character arcs, which I know are RPG staples, it's what we as RPG enthusiasts love. It builds a strong, somber mood that makes each dungeon feel consequential and connected. Gameplay is the make or break of Record of the Lodos War, according to what you enjoy. If you enjoy Diablo, I'm telling you, and I'm not just trying to beat a dead horse here, you'll probably enjoy this game. In this game, you explore large, interconnected dungeons and towns and such filled with monsters, traps, secrets, and gear. Lots of gear. As a matter of fact, you're going to be basically killing monsters and constantly changing equipment. The combat is in real time, and while it can feel a bit stiff compared to faster modern ARPGs, there's a satisfying weight to your sword swings and spellcasting. I keep using this phrase, satisfying weight, but it's true, it's there. It works. You can do it. It's satisfying. But it's not just you swinging as fast as you can click, so maybe combat is a little heavier and slower paced than Diablo. Timing, positioning, and resource management really matter. You'll spend a lot of time dodging and stepping up to swing, or being super mindful to avoid large baddies as they can mow you down pretty quickly. It's less about flashy combos or abilities and more about smart strategy and patience. The customization system seems pretty daggone deep. Other than just leveling up in the traditional RPG sense, I mean, you do level up, most of your power comes from equipment, weapons, armor, and runes that you find and forge. Not forage, forge. Country accent. You inscribe runes onto gear at the blacksmith, modifying their stats and properties. This rune system offers a surprising amount of flexibility. You can experiment with builds, augment your sword with extra damage or vampiric siphoning, or reinforce armor for defense or HP. It's this layer of gear tinkering that gives the game its real hook. You're always upgrading, refining, and tweaking, searching for the perfect balance between your runes and your combat style. There's also a base of operations you return to throughout the game, much like, hey, Diablo, where you can forge items, talk to NPCs, and uncover more bits of lore. It gives the game a rhythm. You jump into a dungeon, survive, return, and upgrade. Rinse and repeat. And that repetition, while occasionally grindy, is part of the appeal. Because hey, the grind is love. Graphically, the game is a little rough around the edges. I've seen some better games on Dreamcast for sure, but it doesn't particularly hurt the game. Character models are chunky and animations are stiff, but the dark backgrounds and moody lighting go a long way in creating a consistent tone. It's just general dreariness. The dungeon environments feel ancient, dangerous, and lived in, like proper ruins covered in blood and history. It's not flashy or anything wild, but it's immersive and appropriate. The soundtrack deserves special mention. It's somber, orchestral, and understated, with themes that echo the game's lonely, haunted atmosphere. It's not the sort of stuff you're likely to listen to out of the game, but not the sort of stuff you'll want to turn down either. The music doesn't beg for your attention. It's not ostentatious, but it lingers in the background, enhancing every slow descent into each new area. It's good. It's good. Record of the Lodos War isn't for everyone, and it wasn't particularly for me. Shame on me, I know. I enjoyed my time with it, but it's definitely not going on my list of games that I want to beat. It's slow, deliberate, and rewards players who love tinkering and grinding in that broody fantasy. I've said it ad nauseum at this point, but if you're a fan of Diablo and the classic anime, this is a no-brainer. Check it out. If you're someone who just wants to experience some deep-cut RPGs with atmosphere and grit, it's probably right up your alley. If you didn't enjoy Diablo though, you're probably not going to fall in love with this game either. It's great at what it does, but it's also upfront about what it does. Record of the Lodos War didn't really do a whole lot with experimentation, but this next game certainly did. It sort of took a catalog of things from the past and reworked them into something fresh. I'm talking about Timestalkers. Timestalkers has an excellent name in Japan. Climax Landers. Okay. Anyway, released in 2000 in the US as one of the Dreamcast's earliest RPG offerings, Timestalkers is a strange hybrid. It's part traditional dungeon crawler, roguelike, and crossover experiment. Developed by Climax Entertainment of the Landstalker fame, it was positioned as a nostalgic callback to the developer's earlier titles while trying to introduce fresh ideas to the genre. What we got was a game that's equal parts, oh, that's neat, and equal parts, that's a little silly. This game is definitely a curiosity of its time, but it's not without its merit, and maybe it was a little too harshly judged in its time. You play as Sword, a hot-headed young adventurer who certainly looks like a vampire, but at the point I made it to, not a drop of blood one had been sucked. What a disappointment. This confusingly named hero gets mysteriously pulled into a bizarre floating dimension, a hub world, if you will. This place serves as a nexus connecting various realities, and each of these realities is a nod to past Climax games, apparently. The only one that I met and recognized was Nigel from Landstalker, but finding him and Friday, his fairy, was really awesome. Wait a minute. Sword the Adventurer, Friday the Fairy.
I love Lamp. I love Lamp.
Great naming conventions. Nintendo with stuff like the Wii U, the new Nintendo 3DS, and the Nintendo Switch would be really proud of these naming conventions. Good job, guys. Either way, this concept of pulling some of their past characters and worlds together is a neat throwback. For people who are unfamiliar, it might feel like you've dropped into a reunion party where you don't really know anybody, but the vibes are still kind of good, so maybe stick around, get some punch, hang out. The core gameplay revolves around exploring randomized dungeons filled with enemies, traps, and treasures. A questionable thing is this: each time you enter a dungeon, your level resets to 1. Okay, that's fine, I get it, roguelike. But this roguelike mechanic was divisive then, and I mean, maybe even so now. For me, I think it would have been better just without it. It's not without thought, I'm sure, as on one hand, it forces you to be strategic and resourceful, valuing equipment, monster allies, and items above brute leveling, but on the other hand, it can feel punishing, especially when you invest time into developing your character, only to have your progress wiped clean by the next dungeon. Again, it's roguelike, I get it, but it really kind of robbed you from a sense of progression and, you know, that's a bit of a bummer. Supposedly the monster collection is something to be a large role, but in the time that I spent with it early on, I didn't really see a need for it. If you're doing it right, I suppose you can recruit monsters Pokemon style, train them and bring them into dungeons as party members. It's supposed to add to the combat and give the combat some much needed variety, but I really don't like most systems like this. And since I was able to basically just not use it and be fine, I didn't use it. Maybe if I would have played more of this game, I would have found the need to use a companion, but at this point, I didn't have a problem being solo. Combat is turn-based on a grid-like battlefield. It's straightforward with basic attacks, magic, and item usage. There's not much depth here compared to other Dreamcast RPGs, but it moves quickly and it does its job. It's the kind of system that's easy to pick up, but may leave hardcore tacticians wanting a little more. As an example, I think it's deceptively shallow. It kind of looks like it's a little deeper on the surface level, but when you get into it, it's not that impressive. I expected it to be more difficult and more involved given the markings and spacings and such, but it mostly comes down to, hey, I can't reach this enemy with this ability, so I'll just choose another ability and stab him from a distance or whatever. Along the way too, you sort of starve to death as you walk along, so you have to make sure that you're eating food you find along the way. It's a lot of like just small things that are put together, a lot of ideas that are in this conglomerate to make a game that I'm just not sure how effective it came out. The game limits the amount of items you can carry into certain dungeons pretty heavily as well. Sometimes you have to decide between carrying more healing items or carrying a piece of equipment for more defense or offense. Becomes a bit of a Sophie's choice, really.
We'll be closing in 2 minutes.
Outside the dungeons, the hub world functions like a town. You can interact with other crossover characters, shop, take on quests, and slowly uncover the mystery of this bizarre world. While the story never fully capitalizes on its premise, the characters are quirky enough to keep things moving. And there's a strange charm to seeing these unrelated game worlds mashed together. Kind of reminds me of that kids cartoon from the 80s where it's like Disney characters and like Looney Tunes characters all come together to tell kids to stay off drugs.
We're getting high. You know, grass.
Visually, Timestalkers is very much a product of early Dreamcast 3D. It's blocky models, stiff animations, and overly bright color palettes. I love the blocky characters and 3D models, don't get me wrong. I do not love the profile pics for these folks. They are just bad. The game is certainly not ugly, but unless you have this appreciation for those chunky models, you're likely to argue that this game hasn't aged gracefully. The environments have personality at times, but disappointingly, they're often empty or repetitive. The soundtrack is similarly sort of uneven, upbeat in places, oddly haunting in others, but just odd mostly, as it swings from silly stuff to more epic stuff. And it's not bad, it's separately, all the music's pretty good. It's just weirdly combined. I don't hate it, it's just odd, and I think that's the best I can say about it. Timestalkers is a game with big ideas and mixed execution. And of course, I wanted to give it a fair shake. It's addictive as a gameplay loop, I think. I ended up playing more than I anticipated I would, so that's a cool bit of celebration for it. I'm torn about Timestalkers because I appreciate it for trying something different, for daring to be bold, but the sum of its parts never fully hits. Still again, there's something admirable about this game. It feels like a transitional RPG, caught between generations, systems, and styles. For Dreamcast collectors or fans of quirky dungeon crawlers, hey, it's worth a look, it really is. Just go in knowing it's more cult classic than forgotten masterpiece. If you're willing to forgive it, you'll probably have a good time. Now, where Timestalkers fell short in experimentation, this next game certainly succeeded. This next game is kind of great, but the experimentation might have been so successful that it actually just relegated it to obscurity. It kind of doomed it to be a cult classic. I'm talking about the lesser known Elemental Gimmick Gear, or EGG. Released in 1990 exclusively for the Dreamcast and never again, ever, anywhere, Elemental Gimmick Gear, commonly shortened to EGG, is one of those games that you tell people you're familiar with and you're proud of it. It's obscure to the nth degree. The astronomical chances of you standing in the same room with someone else who has played this game is probably as wild as the chance that you were in the same room with someone else who was also adopted by a pack of wolves and raised to be an imperial flutist or something. It's just a game that people never talk about. Developed by Hudson Soft, EGG is a strange and beautiful combination of 2D art, RPG mechanics, and Zelda-style exploration, all presented with a dreamlike, melancholic tone that sets it apart from almost anything else on the system, or really anywhere else. It's a fever dream at best. It didn't get a lot of press back in the day, and not many people talk about it now. It's never mentioned among the best RPGs of all time, nor is it derided as the worst RPGs of all time. But if you're one of those people who have played it, you've likely not forgotten it, and it's not hard to see why. The story begins in a sci-fi fantasy future where archaeologists uncover a mysterious egg-shaped mech and the sleeping man inside it. It's odd. It feels a little like Secret of Evermore. For some reason, it just gives me those vibes. The dude, dubbed the Sleeper, is who you awake as 5,000 years later in a world on the brink of collapse. The issue is a giant mechanical tree known as the Fogna that's begun to spread corruption and monsters across the land. It's really not your standard stuff. There are instances, ideas like fog and such, and corruption in a game, but the combination of things is just really kind of unique. There's a surprising amount of offbeat story and lore here, much of it delivered through optional dialogue, some old logs, and layered environmental stuff that you have to piece together. Today's word is wait. It feels like the world has weight, like it's lived in, like it could be a real place. It's as if things happened long before you arrived and you're just piecing it together as you go. And that's an incredible world-building compliment. Good job. Gameplay is where Egg gets its Zelda comparisons. It's a top-down action RPG where you explore interconnected areas, solve puzzles, fight enemies in real time, and gain new abilities that help you reach places you couldn't at one point. To take it one step further in Weird World, you do all this from inside your mech, the titular gimmick gear, or the egg thing. And that sort of gives the game a unique feel. Movement has a subtle ding 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 weight to it. The animations are beautifully hand-drawn, and while the controls are a little stiff compared to more fluid action RPGs, they sort of force a bit of intentionality that works in the game's favor. I know I've used this phraseology often today in particular, but it has a bit of weight, like the weight of the mech, and it complements the game well. Wait. Combat is simple, but it's satisfying. I didn't want to stop killing things. It's simple and easy at times, but it's also incredibly brutal at others. I died so often. From your mech, you'll use melee attacks, chargeable arm swipes, elemental add-ons, and dodging to battle enemies and bosses. You can spin in your mech and bump into enemies, which can be really effective. It almost feels like using Link's charge with his sword. The game doesn't bombard you with options. This isn't a stats-heavy RPG, but it does ask you to be thoughtful. You got a long arm? Use that thing. Enemy patterns can be punishing if you aren't paying attention, especially in boss fights, which are often intense encounters against massive mechanical monstrosities. They feel epic and challenging in the best way. Between battles, you're encouraged to explore, talk to villagers, and soak in the atmosphere, which is dripping with personality. The towns are small, but they're distinct, and there's a lot of optional flavor text that helps flesh out the post-apocalyptic world. The pacing is slow and deliberate, but it gives the game room to breathe. If you're in the right mood, it's almost like meditative, especially given those painted and beautiful backgrounds. What really sets Egg apart is its presentation. The hand-drawn 2D backgrounds are sincerely like museum paintings, richly detailed and textured. It's a style rarely seen on the Dreamcast or any 3D heavy system. Character and enemy designs are expressive, despite being minimalistic pixel art. The use of color gives every region a unique tone, like dusty ruins, mossy forests, glowing laboratories, that sort of stuff. The music is similarly haunting and minimalist, filled with ambient tracks that fit the game's solitary mood perfectly. The soundtrack is almost as lovely as the background. Despite it being a gorgeous and seemingly well-considered experience, it does have some flaws. Load times between areas can be a bit much. The map system kinda sucks, to be honest, and the lack of clear direction at times can leave you wondering. At one point, I assumed that I was supposed to continue with my newly acquired toy through the rest of the dungeon, Zelda style, but nope. I was supposed to leave the dungeon and go back to town to return to the dungeon later.
Go outside, nerd. Get out. Go!
What an odd design choice. I mean, I guess it's not wrong to ask a player to do this, but in the grand scheme of how gaming has been for so long, I wasn't trained for that. Despite running around, the game is a fairly short RPG, and perhaps that's a blessing. Its uniqueness lingers without overstaying its welcome, which I think is the perfect measure of a good game. Elemental Gimmick Gear is a different cat. It may not have made headlines, but it found a distinct identity through art, mood, and world building. If you like what you see here, certainly give it a go. Maybe, just maybe, you can find your long-lost wolf brother and be reunited with the other Imperial Flutists of the world. Egg might have been a wildly experimental game, and to its benefit, but this next game just kind of stayed close to the RPG turn-based roots, and it did it really well. It was one of the first RPGs for the Dreamcast, but I still think it's one of the best. I'm talking about Evolution. Released in 1999 in the US, Evolution, the World of Sacred Device, was one of the very first RPGs to grace the Dreamcast. Fans of the genre, like me, were patiently waiting to see what RPGs would look like on the newest generation of hardware. It was that weird waiting game I played with each generation, and sort of still do. If games look like Sonic Adventure on the Dreamcast, what will an RPG look like, right? It's going to be insane. This is the same sort of waiting game I played with Quest 64 after seeing Mario 64. Now, this too was a game that I don't recall disappointing me back then, but it's also one that I didn't appreciate as much until now, I'm confident. Developed by Sting Entertainment and published by Ubisoft in the West, Evolution is a dungeon crawler through and through. Like Record of the Lodos War, it wears its heart on its sleeve, but not as a specifically derivative game, but more of a simple, charming adventure that served as an accessible introduction to RPGs on the system, and that's okay. You play as Mag Launcher, a young, wide-eyed adventurer and heir to the famous family of explorers who hunt for ancient psi-frames. These psi-frames are powerful relics left behind by a long-lost civilization. Mag is joined by a small but colorful cast of characters, including, but not limited to, the elegant, gun-wielding linear cannon, who barely speaks but carries mysterious power, and the quirky young rival, Chain Gun, a hot-headed mercenary who has the hots for Mag Launcher. I feel these characters are borderline stereotypes and tropes in themselves, but I also appreciate that they are all enjoyable despite this. It certainly feels a little anime-ish, and that's not a complaint at all. The plot is light, focusing on more personal relationships and small stakes than epic wars and world-ending cataclysms, and I can appreciate it for that. There's an overarching story, but it really does just come back to the relationships between the characters. This, in my opinion, adds to the charm of the game. It's almost like an anime filler arc. Low pressure, gently funny, and sort of great in its simplicity. The gameplay revolves around exploring procedurally generated dungeons where floors shift each time you enter. Battles are turn-based with a straightforward system that emphasizes basic attacks, skill points used for special moves, and psi-frame abilities unique to each character. It's nothing groundbreaking, but it's snappy and it's functional, and for those who enjoy turn-based combat, it's pretty great without being overwhelming. There's a small grid system, but it's not terribly complicated. Some moves hit enemies formed in V formations, and some hit enemies in straight lines. I don't think of it as much different than maybe Chrono Trigger or Lunar, where placement is kind of important, but it's really not that important. Some abilities manipulate enemies around the grid to help set up kill zones. I'm fairly confident you could beat this game without having to master this setup at all. It's fine. You could be a devious tactician, or you could just blunder your way through without too many issues.
Bye-bye.
One of the nicest things regarding this is that the combat doesn't overstay its welcome. It's in and out rather quickly, so I never found it to be overwhelming. The encounter rate really isn't too bad, particularly since you can see the enemies on the map. I always appreciate that in any game, and dungeon floors tend to be small enough that it doesn't become overwhelming. I actually found myself tracking down enemies just to fight because I enjoyed the combat. Where Evolution differs from other RPGs of the era is its loop and structure. The game doesn't have an overworld or large traversable towns in the plural sense. Instead, it centers on a single hub city where you accept missions, stock up on gear and items, and then jump into one of the several dungeons to complete objectives. It's a gameplay loop more akin to something like Azure Dreams and its Tower, or Timestalkers, funny enough, rather than Final Fantasy or Dragon Quest. This gives the game a bite-sized pick-up-and-play feel, which, now that I think about it, feels oddly at home on the Dreamcast, which definitely had an overall arcadey feel to it. The visuals, to me, are impressive when considering the confines of the time. Some enemies look better than others, but I think the character models are great. Sure, they're simple and chibi-like, with big heads and cute animations, but I think hyper-realization would have really taken something away from the charm of this game. I think the visual style with the characters is rather distinct. I like it. The environments are repetitive, sure, but it's understandably so, given that it's procedural generation, right? Despite this, they have that colorful late 90s Dreamcast sheen that's pleasant to look at. The cutscenes, delivered in-engine with plenty of facial expressions and physical comedy, give the game a breezy tone, and it looks nice even today. The soundtrack is super adventurous, and I love it for it. It's grandiose at times and at times whimsical, all the while feeling appropriately light. This is a bit of a distinction from Timestalkers. Timestalkers just didn't feel like the songs fit together. They didn't feel like they came from the same world. But this one certainly does. It's weird to explain. I know that whimsical and grandiose are juxtaposing terms, but it's solid. It certainly fits the mood and idea of the game. Evolution isn't a heavy-hitting RPG, and it never tries to be. It doesn't try to sell you on that concept. It's short, linear, and deeply repetitive at times, but on the other hand, that also means that it's endearing, focused, and it's low stakes in a way that can be so refreshing. It's just however you choose to look at it. Apparently the sequel is super solid, but I've not played it at all. I look forward to visiting it on a future Dreamcast video. I think it would be a disservice to overlook this game as an early throwaway game on the Dreamcast library. It might not have aged gracefully in every aspect, but it delivers exactly what it promises. A simple story, lighthearted characters, and a comforting RPG loop. It's one that I owned for years and then sold, but I'm thinking now that I want to seek this one out again and add it to my collection. But the time that I spent with it, it was immensely enjoyable. Speaking of spending time together, if you've made it this far, there's a good chance that you could be enjoying my content. I mean, you've suffered me this far, right? I have many other videos, very similar to this one, about many other RPGs on different systems. Consider checking those out, and if you enjoy them, hey, consider subscribing to my content. There's plenty more coming down the line that looks just like this setup. So join up and add some games to your already incredible backlog with me. Let's continue. Grandia II. Released in 2000 by Game Arts. Oh yes, the same Game Arts that did Lunar and of course Grandia Part 1. Grandia II was a proclamation. Not only could the Dreamcast handle a traditional Japanese RPG, it could do so with style, speed, and polish. This game rocks. As the follow-up to a well-regarded but sort of niche RPG on the Sega Saturn and PlayStation, this sequel refined its predecessor's mechanics while moving to a darker tone and a fully 3D presentation. I did not anticipate enjoying this game as much as I did, but given the time I spent with it, I discovered that it is absolutely great and worthy of that Grandia label. See, I'm a fairly big fan of the original game, having grown up on it. I played it and I watched buddies master it. I love the art style of the original, the ideas, the story, and basically everything about it. I didn't anticipate the transition into full 3D would go so well. The result of this transition though? A game that became a cornerstone of the Dreamcast RPG catalog, and one of the most beloved turn-based adventures of its era that would escape the confines of the Dreamcast exclusivity and be ported time and time again because it's great. You play as Ryudo, a sassy boy with a chip on his shoulder and a talking falcon named Sky, who sounds very much like the narrator of superhero cartoons.
Ryudo, I cannot take much more of this.
Meanwhile, at the Hall of Justice.
You join Ryudo in the midst of his journeys as he takes a routine job escorting a young songstress named Elena on a religious mission. But things quickly spiral, as they often do, into a globe-trotting quest involving gods, ancient evils, and the messy line between good and evil. It doesn't take long to get into the real meat of the plot. Hey, and I certainly appreciate that. A part that I found a little funny, but a little dark of course, was the setup of getting this girl to her religious engagement. These people were certainly insistent that I was the issue and that I shouldn't step foot in the tower during their ritual. That sounds a little sus, as folks used to say. You'll be absolutely wide-eyed and blown away to know that something terrible was going on in there. It sort of reminded me of the movie Midsummer. Anyway, what starts as a familiar JRPG setup becomes this thoughtful, impressive plot tackling themes of faith, redemption, corruption, and identity, with more nuance than one might have anticipated. Ryudo himself is a highlight, snarky, bitter, and eventually deeply human. He's a rare kind of protagonist in the genre often dominated with wide-eyed dreamers. He's not quite brooding, but he's certainly not bright-eyed and bushy-tailed either. He tends to lean a little more so into sass than I particularly like, but he seems to mature a little as you go as well. The combat system, like Grandia 1's, is where Grandia 2 really shines. Building on the excellent mechanics of the first game, battles play out on a circular field where timing and positioning really matter. Characters and enemies move around dynamically, and the action gauge determines when each participant can act. Attacks can be standard, critical, which interrupts enemy actions, or combo-based, and spells take time to cast, meaning that you can time interrupts or buffs with strategic precision, but it takes precision. Precision is certainly the word here, but it's so satisfying and addictive when you interrupt the enemy's attack and set their engagement bar back. It's fast and fluid too. Every fight feels like a mini puzzle, which keeps battles fun. Boss battles especially reward tactical thinking as it becomes important to interrupt abilities, rewarding the mastering of that combat timing. Character progression is straightforward. You equip mana eggs to teach spells and collect special coins to upgrade skills. The game is generous with customization without becoming overwhelming, and the pacing of new abilities and enemies keeps things fresh. I felt I had a solid grasp on how the system works even in my short time spent with the game so far. It's not complicated, but it's worthwhile. Visually, Grandia 2 absolutely stands out. These 3D models might seem a little dated now, sure, but the art direction is clean, colorful, and expressive. These are absolutely stunning given the context of the game's release, and they still look great today. Granted, what you're seeing here is an upscale in the resolution to 2 times the normal rendering, but even without that, it's still impressive. The environments, ranging from lush forest and temples to little towns and larger cities, are varied and beautifully constructed, capturing the excellence in design that Game Arts is known for. Dungeons have slight puzzle elements and are rarely too long, keeping exploration brisk and engaging, which I applaud. I would much rather err on the side of a shorter dungeon than a 5-hour excursion or so. Brevity keeps the pacing rolling, and it's worth noting that this game does well with it. The voice acting is typical of the times, but extends, I think, into the better than normal category. Some characters are spot on, while others feel, kind of like an afterthought, I guess. But, as intended, I imagine it adds personality to the characters and makes them even more memorable. The music is just phenomenal. It's a majestic and emotional soundtrack that ranges from haunting to hopeful, all along with the flair and character of electric guitars. Tracks like A Deus are absolutely gorgeous as well and have all the charm of late 80s and early 90s anime. This definitely causes them to linger in the memory long after the game ends. I can't say enough about the soundtrack, it is great. What makes Grandia II stand out 2 decades later despite all the noted excellence is how it balances things so well. It offers heartfelt characters with little melodrama, classic RPG tropes without excess padding, and a combat system that manages to feel both traditional and dynamic. It's not overly long, like 20 to 30 hours maybe for most players, but that tight runtime is part of its strength. It respects your time as a player while delivering an emotionally evocative and satisfying adventure. For many people, Grandia II was proof that the Dreamcast could stand shoulder to shoulder with the PlayStation in the RPG arena and be proud of what it accomplished. Even today, it's an easy recommendation for fans of the genre. It's smart, stylish, and filled with heart, and fortunately it's not too difficult to find on modern platforms, though the Dreamcast version is typically heralded as the best version. You know, part of that might be because it was so impressive to be on the Dreamcast, but I guess in context it's less impressive when considered on the PlayStation 2 next to juggernauts like Final Fantasy X. But that's okay. Grandia II absolutely smoked my expectations. Check it out. Now, it's probably going to come as no surprise the game that I enjoyed the most in playing these RPGs on the Dreamcast. Oh my goodness. The next game is touted, of course, as the RPG for the Sega Dreamcast, and there's really no question why. People have absolutely been clamoring for years for a remake of this game, and here's to hoping that we get one. The game, of course, that I'm talking about is Skies of Arcadia. Released in 2000 by Overworks, a division of Sega. My goodness, let's just stop and take a moment and think about how incredible Sega just nailed RPGs. They did so good. They did so good with their RPGs. Their in-house stuff is just so good. Anyway, moving on. Skies of Arcadia is a game that practically defines the term cult classic. While it didn't break sales records at the time, partly due to the Dreamcast's short lifespan, and it did appear on the GameCube, which also didn't break sales records. Dang. Either way, it built a loyal following thanks to its bold world building and ideas, lovable characters, and one of the most sincere, high-spirited adventures that was ever put on a disc. Even now, more than 2 decades later, few RPGs can claim to capture its sense of optimism and wonder. Skies of Arcadia is adventure manifest. You play as Vice, a blue rogue in the game's version of a good faction of Sky Pirate who, along with his childhood friend Aika, dreams of exploring the skies in search of ancient treasures. Their relatively peaceful life aboard their father's airship is interrupted, and they find themselves on a globe-spanning quest when they rescue a mysterious scroll who holds secrets about the powerful Gigas, an ancient weapon capable of reshaping the world. Maybe it's Gigas. Gigas? Earthbound? Is this an Earthbound crossover? What follows is a Sky Pirate epic that spans floating continents, underwater ruins, and ancient civilizations, with a tone that feels equal parts Indiana Jones and equal parts Castle in the Sky by Miyazaki. It's that rare sort of RPG that feels adventurous without being dark, overly emotional, or just bleak. At the heart of Skies of Arcadia is the exploration of an incredibly built world of wonder. The game world is impressively vast, open, and constantly rewarding your curiosity. It certainly feels ahead of its time. You pilot your ship across the skies, discovering uncharted islands, storm-filled skies, hidden ruins, and legendary creatures. There's a real thrill in setting sail with a floating pirate ship, moving toward a clear goal, but no real guarantee about what's over the next horizon. The feeling of scale, especially for the Dreamcast era, is still magnificent. Combat is traditional turn-based with a few highlights that I appreciate. Each character draws from a shared pool of spirit points to cast spells or unleash special moves, so resource management is key. Hitting enemies and such builds this bar, and you can use it to execute some neat special moves. It builds fast, fortunately, so it's not the end of the world if you choose to use it at the, quote, wrong time. Battles are fast-paced, visually slick, and benefit from the elemental weapon system that encourages experimentation. You can change the element of your weapon by simply pressing a button before the attack, and this changes not only the affinity of the weapon, but how characters learn spells and grow from it. If you use the green weapon, you gain wind power, and that gives you experience in wind that allows you to learn heals and such. On top of that, the game includes ship-to-ship combat, where you maneuver your airship against enemy vessels in cinematic, multi-turn duels. These fights are considerably slower and not particularly similar to the normal battle system, but they break up the pacing with some more strategy, often turning into puzzles where you try to anticipate enemy movements and time your cannons just right. It's a little weird at first, but once you get the hang of it, you'll be excited that you're having a freaking Sky Pirate ship battle. That's awesome. It's just, so cool. So cool. The cast is just delightful. Vice is the rare JRPG protagonist who's upbeat without being naive, courageous without being reckless. Aika is fiery and loyal, and Finna's arc brings depth to what starts as the mysterious girl trope. I've not finished the game, but I hear that later editions round out a party that feels more like a family than a battle squad. Their banter, loyalty, and shared growth give the game some real tenderness. Visually, as you can see, Skies of Arcadia still holds up well. The colors are rich, the cities and cultures distinct, and the airship designs are exciting and just spiffy. The Dreamcast hardware was no doubt pushed hard to render this skybound world, but Sega knows its hardware, I suppose, and it's certainly paid off. The soundtrack, like Grandia II, is just excellence. Its soaring orchestral themes, catchy town melodies, and thrilling battle music that matches the game's highs and lows. I've lauded it as such, but Skies of Arcadia isn't perfect. Random battle frequency is a little high, which I personally don't mind too much because the grind is love, but some people might not enjoy that. The story, while heartfelt, leans heavily on familiar RPG beats, but that's okay to me as well, it's fine. And really, that's about it for my criticisms, if you even want to call them criticisms. Neither of these things really undermine the impact of this now recognized classic. It's a game that captures the love of exploration while being a freaking sky pirate. That is too cool. Unlike many RPGs of the time, it doesn't try to be edgy or subversive. It wants you to have a good time growing with your characters and learning more about the world at large. It does a great job of capturing that desire, of selling you on sailing for adventure. I mean, if you've never dreamed of sailing among the clouds, discovering lost worlds, or fighting sky pirates with a ragtag crew of best friends, why are you watching this video?